Those of you longtime fans of the channel might remember that I was very critical of Doom Eternal. I'm not going to go into all my reasons again, but the short version is I just wasn't a huge fan of the style of gameplay. The ultra-fast, twitchy, high reflexes, switching weapons every millisecond, Simon Says style gameplay where you're sort of pigeonholed into a very specific play style. There's a reason it was called Zoom Eternal, because it very much felt like Zoomer appealing gameplay. Now, obviously, for the speedrunner types or the challenge run type people, it was definitely a very high skill ceiling game. It was also a quality game, without a doubt. It still made it to one of my favorite games of 2020. So I don't hate it by any stretch, but I did have a reputation at the time for having a bad take on it and then going nuclear on speedrunner type people. And I still more or less think the same thing about speedrunners. I won't go into why, but let's just say that community attracts a very specific type of person who would hate my guts. And the reason I bring this up is because when I heard that Doom the Dark Ages would be taking a completely different approach, the Doom Slayer would be much slower, and the theme of the game is to stand and fight, I thought, oh wow, they actually listened to the criticisms that a shit ton of people, including me, had for Doom Eternal. Well, as you could probably imagine by the title I picked, the monkey's paw curled, and this game is obviously worse than Doom Eternal. Hell, it's worse than Doom 2016. I don't know what the fuck they were thinking with this game, but basing half of the gameplay around pressing right-click at the right time makes us feel even less like a Doom game than Doom 3. Sure, you can make the argument that it is somewhat unique in the same way that Doom Eternal was very unique for the FPS genre. But given that parry mechanics are in every goddamn video game now, who asked for this? Nobody. I understand if they didn't want to double down on Doom Eternal's mechanics. I know I sure as hell didn't want id Software to do that. But man, it feels like they overcorrected in all the wrong ways, and they didn't even solve the Simon Says problem. In fact, it's much worse in this game. Having giant glowing projectiles that you right-click over and over and over again is just not fun at all. And because you're so slow, you don't even end up using like half of the combat arenas. If anything, one of the most effective strategies in this game is to stand in a corner and just parry, 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 because as soon as an enemy gets behind you, you fucking die in like a millisecond, at least on Nightmare. And Nightmare difficulty, as you've probably heard already, is probably the easiest it's ever been in this series. I chose Nightmare on my first playthrough, and almost every time I died was just because the game literally spawned enemies behind me, or the enemies circled around behind me because I got a little bit too bold and charged forward into a crowd of enemies, which is basically committing Sudoku in this game. And on top of all this, we have fucking gimmick levels now, where you get to play as a giant mech and all you do is press left click, oh, spacebar to dodge, then right click, and then you do that over and over and over and over again, and there's absolutely no skill involved. The dragon's even worse because it can take like 4 or 5 hits without dying, and the gameplay is arguably even more simplistic than the mech. It's not fun at all. There's even turret sections. Can you imagine a turret section in Doom 2016 or Eternal? This is the first time in the new Doom series that I've ever gotten bored playing the game. For all my problems with Doom Eternal, I could never say for even a second I was bored. Pissed off, yeah, plenty of times. Never bored. So yeah, as you can probably imagine just by the intro, this is going to be kind of just an off-the-cuff review, because I really don't feel that strongly about this game. It's just kind of okay. Sure, a bit above average, especially by modern standards, but I'm truly baffled how they managed to make such a bland game. I'm going to say something strange here that you would never expect me to say, but I unironically kind of recommend G-Man Live's review on this, because he went into more detail than I'm going to about the problem with a lot of the gunplay and the main gameplay mechanics. He was actually surprisingly critical of this, given he was the guy who fucking shilled Starfield and a bunch of other dog shit video games in the past. Listening to his review is actually a breath of fresh air, because he just kind of told it like it was. Honestly, I thought it was a well-formulated critique from him. Now, this review, by comparison, is just going to be me kind of rambling about the various issues with this game, because, yeah, I have no desire to really be fair to it. There's no excuse for Doom the Dark Ages to be this boring, because there's very few elements of this game that truly redeem it. This is the type of thing that you would buy on a deep sale or, you know, sail the high seas, or even avoid it entirely if this gameplay doesn't look fun to you. And so without further ado, here's Doom: The Dark Ages. So of course, as usual, we'll be talking about gameplay first, and this is one review I don't think anyone would argue that'd be a mistake, because the core gameplay loop is the only reason people care about Doom. And like I said in the intro, they fucked it up. This entire game is centered around the fucking shield. Half the guns don't even matter because a lot of them just serve the same purpose. Or arguably no purpose at all because there's so much overlap. Doom Eternal, for my various problems with it, actually had a lot of kind of layered mechanics, which all work together to create that ultra-fast gameplay experience where the people who got really good at the game could just annihilate the tougher mobs in like a split second. Whereas this game, you could take things as fast or slow as you want, as long as you make sure to manage your shield health, you're completely fine. Like I said in the intro, if you see a green melee attack or projectile, you hit right click at the right time, and the parry window is very generous, by the way. And yes, I know you can adjust the various difficulty stuff, we'll get into that later. But I played this on Nightmare difficulty, and the parry window is like so ridiculously generous. As long as you have a general idea of when the attack comes out, you'll parry it every time. And when you parry 1 or 2, sometimes 3 attacks from an enemy, they're vulnerable for a few seconds, where you can melee them in response. And there's 3 different melee weapons, not really gonna go into the differences, but basically you either punch a guy, hit him with a flail, or with a huge club. And much like the chainsaw in the previous games, this is how you get ammo back. You can also use this stagger period to just shoot the demons, which occasionally is a better idea, but for the most part, you're gonna want that ammo, and if you're using the flail, you're gonna get armor back too. And sometimes the vulnerability period lasts long enough that even after hitting them 3 times, you can still get like a triple burst shot with the combat shotgun to get even more armor back. But you end up melee spamming so often, even though the flail has like a much slower recharge than the gauntlet, you get charge back by parrying attacks. So you end up spamming E to smack enemies like a million times over the course of a fight. And I know I said I wouldn't really explain the differences, but after completing the game, I do have to talk about the mace just because it's completely overpowered. Now, of course, a weapon like this is nothing new to the series. The Crucible from Doom Eternal, I recall being pretty fucking strong, and then the hammer that you got in the DLC was even more OP. But the mace is definitely the equivalent in this game, where despite the fact that it takes quite a few parries to recharge the melee, it can kill tough demons in a single hit. And once you get its final upgrade, you can get 2 hits back to back, which completely kills even the elite level enemies. And for some reason, it shoots out a shockwave that also damages nearby enemies. So you can just kind of swing this thing with reckless abandon and kill everything as long as you have charges for it. It is a utterly and completely brain dead weapon, with the only downside being that you don't get armor, unlike the flail. I don't think I need to describe to you why having a shit ton of really janky lock-on melee combat in an FPS is not very satisfying, because it just takes no skill at all. I hesitate to use the insult console shooter, but that's what this feels like 100%. I feel like aiming barely comes up, even though there's a weapon that does more damage when you shoot a guy in the head. One, it's actually kind of a close range weapon, it has huge fall off at range. It only maybe shoots like a couple 100 feet. So you gotta be close to the enemy anyway, which is gonna make headshots a lot easier. And this javelin launcher also has an upgrade, which slows down time before you shoot, so it's even fucking easier to hit the head. But also, it's not like it does crazy damage. There's a lot of enemies that could take like 4 or 5 shots from this fucking thing. I feel like a demon taking a charged javelin shot to the face maybe should be killed a little bit faster, but there's so many like high damage tier weapons in this game anyway that you could probably just use, I don't know, the rocket launcher, the grenade launcher, the fucking chain ball launcher like I mentioned earlier, the super shotgun. There's so much overlap between like the weapon categories. There's very little utility between them. Most of the utility is reserved for the shield. It's not just about blocking or parrying attacks. You can also throw the shield, which can lodge into enemies, holding them in place, which is important because they've added more hit scan type enemies that can just damage you from afar. Like the Arachnotrons can do that now, so you want to throw the shield into them and then just kill them super quickly. And there's an upgrade you can get for the shield which widens the hitbox from throwing it, which can clear out a shit ton of fodder demons in like a split second, which completely trivializes any crowd control weapons like this skull shredder thing that you get early on, and arguably the rocket launcher, grenade launcher could also do that. Well, why would you do that when you can just throw your shield really quick, and as soon as you hit right click, it gets right back in your hand instantly for a parry? There's no downside at all to throwing your shield. You can also do a shield bash, which allows you to charge quickly across the arena. It's by far your fastest movement ability. And you're supposed to be invincible during this animation, but early on I actually died a couple times. I don't know if that was a bug or not. This game is actually noticeably quite a bit less polished than the previous two games. And I'll get a little bit more into the optimization stuff later, but yeah, the shield bash I mainly just used as an alternative form of a glory kill, because a lot of times you can't get in to finish an enemy from far away, and so you can just shield bash and it counts as the same thing. Well, they sort of removed glory kills, not completely. If you approach an enemy from the air, you can still get a glory kill animation, but on the ground, you just kind of shield bash or kick the enemy and they fall apart into gore. I know a lot of people are complaining about this, but after playing the first two games and seeing the glory kills 1,000 times, I'm actually completely fine with this. Shield runes are also a thing, but they don't add any depth to the gameplay whatsoever. It's just an additional effect whenever you parry something. Whether it shoots out homing daggers, or a mini earthquake that staggers enemies, or lightning bolts that paralyze them, or an auto turret that does a shit ton of damage. Those sound cool on paper, but they require no skill at all because you're parrying the whole game anyway. There's no reason not to parry at every single opportunity. So the shield rune mechanic is just an extra power fantasy effect on top of everything else. I don't even think I have to describe the general flow of gameplay, because you can just watch the screen and see, yeah, it's right click, right click, right click, right click, over and over and over again, while you just shoot them with whatever weapon is appropriate for the situation. I'm pretty thankful that it feels like there's a little bit more freedom in what weapon you want to choose for each situation. I actually completely ignored a couple of the guns just because, again, like I mentioned earlier, the weapon balance is kind of whack. While there's two weapons in most of the ammo categories, one of them is just objectively better than the other one, it seems like. I think the most tragic one of these is the combat shotgun versus the super shotgun, because although the super shotgun is obviously way stronger, it also just doesn't do anything. Like I said, there's a bunch of high damage weapons already. Even if the super shotgun is more damaging, it's something you have to be extremely close to enemies to use, which you would think would be just fine in a game where you have a shield, but some of these harder encounters where they're throwing a million projectiles at you and your shield breaks if you block too many red, or even worse, blue projectiles in the case of the Revenant, then you're left as a sitting duck, and that's another way to instantly die in this game. So, I mean, sure, the super shotgun is usable, but if you compare it to like Doom Eternal, where at a chain you could swing around the arena, it didn't matter if it was inefficient. I thought it was fun as fuck. In this, it just shoots one high damage shot. That's all it does. The combat shotgun causes enemies to burn, which gives you armor. And that's actually unique utility. No other gun gives you armor. Yes, the flail gives you armor when you smack guys, but it's nice to have two ways to do it, especially if you want to get all your armor back quickly. You could say the same of like the chain gun versus the javelin. The chain gun is just like a generic assault rifle. And like I already mentioned about the javelin, you shoot enemy weak spots and it does a shit ton of damage, and it also slows down time. And then in some cases it feels like they're actually too similar, like the grenade launcher versus the rocket launcher. The rocket launcher has a unique gimmick where if you parry, instead of damaging yourself with the explosion, it heals you. But again, how much different is that ultimately to just getting armor back? Most likely you're going to be out of armor, not out of health, or you'll be dead. So I ended up just using the grenade launcher instead, and even then I didn't use the grenade launcher often. As I already explained before, the shield is the best mob clearing weapon. Now you might make the argument that, oh well, you're going to use a bunch of these guns because you'll run out of ammo, right? Because you might remember that Doom Eternal had weapon, armor, health, flamethrower, chainsaw, grenade launcher, all these different cooldowns that you had to juggle between. That was a huge part of like the skill ceiling of that game. Yeah, they kind of just removed that in this one. The only cooldown that really matters is your shield health and your melee cooldown. Ammo is actually weirdly generous because you get ammo back from meleeing, and like I already said, you're gonna be smacking demons every 3 fucking seconds. I barely ever ran out of ammo. And some guns just have a lot of ammo. The second plasma gun you get is the most brainless weapon in this game, bar none. You just hold left click down, and it gives an enemy a debuff that makes them take more damage. And then when they die, that debuff spreads to the next enemy, and so on and so forth. And it gets to a point, too, where if you clear enough mobs, it powers up the gun even further. So you literally just left click, point, like I'm playing fucking COD or something. It's just, it's so bland. Yes, plasma guns still overload plasma shields, but you can also just throw your fucking shield at them. I'm fine with the quick swap from Eternal being removed because it's just not that type of game, but there's no reason that it should take like 3 seconds just to pull another gun out, especially when one of the main gimmicks of one of your guns is to give the enemy a debuff where they take more damage. And so you'd think, oh, you fire some plasma shots off, then switch to like the javelin gun or the chainball or whatever, but it takes so long that it feels like you're just better off keep holding left click until he dies. And because you're constantly getting your ammo back by meleeing enemies, switching weapons doesn't even really feel necessary a lot of the time anyway, unless the next wave of enemies is too far away for you to shoot them with the shotgun or whatever other closer range weapon you have equipped. I have no idea what they were thinking with the weapon balance in this game. It really feels like none of it actually matters, except arguably using the chain ball, because there's specific demons in this game that all they do is melee attack you, so you get in this really shitty, like, well, comparing it to something like Sekiro feels like an insult, but it's the same kind of idea. You stand in front of the demon, you just right-click their attacks, then you bash them with melee, shoot them with the chain ball since it's already charged up, and then rinse and repeat. How the hell is that exciting? Now, yes, if they throw other enemies in the arena shooting you in the back, you probably need to kill those guys first and ignore the melee guy, or you're just going to get shot in the back and die instantly, like I said earlier. But when you're 1v1ing these fucking gladiator guys, it is so boring, because you fight them the same exact way every time, and they have too much fucking health. Even fighting the cyber demon is boring because he just hit scans you from far away, so you just walk up to him, parry a couple melee strikes, shoot him, melee him, rinse and repeat. The amount of enemies that are fought like that in this game is insane. And I've already sort of dipped my toes in, so I guess we could talk about enemy variety. The enemy variety also feels worse than Doom Eternal. The amount of times that I kill a Pinky Rider, and you do the same thing every time. You just headshot him with the javelin, so you kill the rider, and then you just kill the Pinky by shooting it with whatever you want. I mean, it's a huge target. There's not even really specific ways to fight enemies in this game because you just parry projectiles. The Revenant is probably the only interesting enemy type because the blue skulls just vaporize your shield in a second, so you actually have to strafe to dodge. Almost every other projectile in the game has so much homing that you can't even dodge it unless you're sprinting, and you can only sprint straight forward, so you have to literally turn directly to the left or right and sprint. And at that point, why would you even bother unless your shield is about to break? Some enemies have armor, which you have to superheat and then throw your shield at them. And you would think, oh, it's time for more Simon Says gameplay because the chain ball is better at breaking armor. But no, not really. You can shoot it with any high rate of fire weapon and then throw your shield just fine. The flail is also good at breaking armor. And a lot of these enemy types are just completely reused from the previous 2 games, with very little different about them except you can just block melee attacks instead of having to dodge them, you know? I've heard some people complain about these redesigns to fit the new medieval aesthetic. Like, imps have hair now, which just looks weird. And the new Caca demons look nothing like Caca demons. Same goes for the Pinkies. The Pinkies are now these huge, like, animals that the demons ride. And there's this huge new lizard demon that just doesn't fit in with the rest. It looks like it came out of a completely different game. And like I said, I don't even know if it's really worth talking about in detail how these different enemy types function, because not only are you already very familiar with them if you played the previous 2 games, but also the shield just trivializes a lot of the unique mechanical differences between them anyway. So enemy variety isn't even really worth talking about to any extent, which is kind of crazy given that enemies made such a huge impact in how you played Doom Eternal. And honestly, I was debating whether or not it's even worth talking about the boss fights, but again, after finishing the game, I now feel compelled to talk about it. The boss fights are ass. A lot of them get demoted into, like, just elite-style enemies later on, and those are just fine. I will say the actual proper boss fights all have too much health, and that could just be because I was playing this on Nightmare. But a lot of them just devolve into find the green projectile in this sort of mini bullet hell style game. And then you just parry that, and you break their stagger meter. Yes, this is ripping off of Souls in another way that we now have fucking stagger meters. This is just some straight-up wannabe Sekiro shit. And if you do max out the stagger meter, the boss is vulnerable, and you do a lot more damage. You know how it is. But you can honestly just shoot the boss to death just fine. The worst bosses were definitely near the end of the game. The obese maker guy that you end up fighting, the first phase is extremely easy and extremely long. One of the easiest, like, jokes of a bullet hell I've ever seen. Just look at this fucking attack, dude. Dude, this is bad. This is actually bad. How is it this bad? I might have to add to the review a section for how bad this boss is. Then the second phase is a little bit more exciting for sure, but much like the rest of this game, as long as you keep all of the targets in front of you, there's no risk of dying. No, the real reason I wanted to talk about the bosses is because the last two boss fights are absolute fucking dog shit. This game wants to be parry slop so goddamn bad that it's kind of embarrassing. The second last boss is literally just 3 phases of a Souls-like boss, where instead of dodge rolling at the right time, you just right-click at the right time. Again, kind of like a Sekiro type of thing. And he delays his attack timings like this is fucking Elden Ring, and so it's just trial and error gameplay. The gun you use doesn't even matter, really. You probably don't even have to shoot him one time. If you just right-click at the right time and then bash him with the mace, you don't have to fire a single round. Now, of course, it helps to shoot him to get it over with faster, but holy fuck was I getting so annoyed, because this is not what anyone plays a shooter for. There's not a single human being on this planet who picks the FPS genre to fucking parry. And yet that's all that the second last boss is, and the last one is not much better. The boss fight in the second last level feels way more climactic and interesting than the one in the actual proper final level. No, the real final boss fight feels almost like a victory lap in a sense, where the first fight is a 2v1 like Ornstein Smo style shit, except with a million projectiles that all break your shield in like 2 hits, which is super goddamn annoying. And then the second phase is a complete breeze, because you're already used to his moveset from the previous 3 phases in the last level. It felt like the devs had no fucking clue how to end this game, and it kind of just ends suddenly at that anyway. So yeah, the boss fights are kind of trash. And before we move on, I do want to talk about difficulty for a second, because infamously, this is another game with difficulty sliders, where you can change all sorts of things, enemy health, your health, or damage, or whatever. The total game speed can be increased if you thought it was a little bit too slow, but obviously the game doesn't seem too balanced around that. The parry window can be increased or decreased, etc., etc., etc. Now, my question to you is, what the hell is the difference between this and accessibility options? Now, yeah, okay, you can make the argument that there's ways to make the game harder than even the hardest difficulty, which, yeah, that does make it one step above accessibility. But let's be honest, that's not what these sliders are for. These sliders are here because, one, game journalists, so that they can slide everything to the easiest level and then just breeze through the game. And two, it's so that they didn't have to fucking actually balance the game, because they knew this gameplay was not that compelling. I know deep down. So they're like, well, if you don't like this, you could just turn it off. Okay, but that's exactly how you make a game forgettable and bland, you know? There's a reason why Souls games still don't even have difficulties to this day, because they're supposed to be handcrafted experiences to be memorable and enjoyable for everyone. I don't have a problem with, like, basic difficulty settings in games, and I didn't touch any of these sliders. I just hit Nightmare and then played through the game. But these should not be here. This is the developers admitting that they did a bad job. They have no confidence at all in their ability to make a handcrafted experience. No, they want to try and appeal to the lowest common denominator, which is, you know, as we all know, the best way to make a game. I mean, what's wrong with making as many people as possible able to enjoy a video game. How about it makes the game fucking suck? I don't know who said this quote, and I don't feel like looking it up, but there's a saying that players will optimize all of the fun out of a game. And I think the same applies to these sliders. There's going to be certain people who just give in because they don't like a certain mechanic, and they're just going to like, oh, let's just turn up the parry window all the way up because I don't really like parrying. I just want to shoot guys. And then you're not even fucking playing the same game anymore. Again, you can just ignore these sliders and it's not going to affect your experience, but they shouldn't be there in the first place. As you probably could figure out from the rest of this gameplay section, it's not like the devs really put a lot of effort into the weapon balance to begin with, and I'm sure these sliders just make things even worse. Honestly, talking about difficulty sliders and accessibility could be its own Gaming is Dying, but just know, it has no place in this Doom series. It is dumb as hell. I don't like it. But I'm not going to end this review here. Let's talk briefly about level design and the story. As for level design, I will say this is a slight improvement over Doom Eternal. My huge complaint with that game is that the whole thing was hallways, battle arenas, and really shitty platforming sections. The level design in this is more similar to Doom 2016, where they kind of feel like actual levels. The problem is the level design is still kind of ass, because like the actual open levels are just giant empty arenas with giant hallways and of course little secret areas, just like the previous two games in the series. But I will take the giant battlefields any day over the it's only battle arenas and nothing else route of the last game. But I'd still say that the levels are somewhat forgettable, to say the least. And another thing, too, that I almost neglected to mention is that a lot of these secret areas have puzzles in them now, though I hesitate to even call them puzzles because they're basically just games of I Spy. You know, I've been complaining about this style of puzzle since God of War Ragnarok came out. I absolutely despise playing I Spy in video games. It is so fucking annoying. It is not interesting. It's just straight up padding to force me to look around a room and be like, oh, I gotta throw my shield at that, and then I walk over here, and then I climb this thing, and then I shield bash this huge block, and then I climb that, and I throw my shield at this other thing. Rinse and repeat. Requires zero brain power. Absolutely none. And there's about 1 million little secret areas that are just like this. Just different variations of scanning the environment for something to interact with. That's all the puzzle is. It's a waste of time. And you're heavily incentivized to do these because you need the collectibles to upgrade your guns, your melee weapons, your shield, just like the previous games in the series. And of course the extra lives too, which will no doubt come in handy. At least the visual design is still nice, like the graphics look good for sure, but something a lot of people are complaining about is this game is much less well optimized than the previous two. Infamously, Doom 2016 and Eternal could run on like 10-year-old hardware no problem. Whereas this game has forced ray tracing. Yes, you can't turn it off. It has much higher system requirements than the previous two. And on top of that, it just looks almost exactly the same as Eternal. There's no notable graphic fidelity increase here. And for content creators, this game actually had a unique problem in that it's not compatible with OBS. And so this is causing the game to crash over and over again, there to be laggy recordings, and in my case, actually blue screen my PC on stream. So obviously a lot of the talent left id Software since Eternal came out. And speaking of talent leaving, Mick Gordon, right? That's the elephant in the room. He didn't come back to do this OST because he was horribly abused by id Software. Not going to go into that, but yeah, instead they hired some company that makes soundtracks of some shit, and holy hell, it is so goddamn generic, dude. There's no way in hell I'm ever going to listen back to any of this OST. If you want to significantly improve your experience playing this game, just mute the music and start playing like BFG Division or The Only Thing They Fear Is You in the background. I mean, instantly I was having a better time. It's crazy how much a good soundtrack can improve a game. I mean, genuinely, people are saying this soundtrack feels AI generated because it just has like the most generic guitar riffs and doesn't even try to be intense or memorable in any way. Okay, now let's get to the story. This is the part nobody really gives a shit, including me. The only reason I'm bringing it up is because this game has probably like 3 times as many cutscenes as the previous 2 in the series, and they add absolutely fucking nothing. If anything, they take away from the game, especially because despite there being so many more cutscenes, the story is almost incomprehensible. I'm not joking. All I understand is that the demons are trying to get like the Heart of Argent or whatever. Eventually they end up getting the artifact, but it turns out, no, it wasn't actually the real artifact. It turns out to be the fucking girl boss, who, despite being a white woman, is voiced by Deborah Wilson. We can't fucking escape this bitch, no matter where we go. And don't give me the fucking NPC response, oh, she's just easy to work with. No, she's a demonic entity who worms her way into every video game. I was tired of looking at her, now I'm tired of hearing her voice. Fucking stay out of video games, bitch. Also, the various humans are very diverse. There's like a token black guy who shows up 5 seconds in. The fact that this chick is the literal fucking MacGuffin, and she has probably more screen time than Doom Guy in cutscenes, which is so stupid. Dude, this shit's painful, man. A lot of the cutscenes just don't even mean anything. There's random time skips in between missions that are not explained. Why are there this many cutscenes? Nobody asked for this. Nobody. I wish I had more to say about the story, but again, I just didn't give a fuck. Nobody did. It was a waste of time. Okay, let's just get to the conclusion. Should you buy Doom the Dark Ages? Maybe on a deep sale. That's about it, honestly. Like, it's not a bad game. It's a bit above average, for sure. But again, if you compare it to the previous 2 games, which people loved for various reasons, this one is just bland, centering the entire game around hitting right-click at the right time, with a generous parry window at that. They managed to make an FPS where your ability to aim barely matters. I feel like so many of your guns have these huge-ass hitboxes, and even the precision weapon doesn't do enough damage to feel like it's any more worth using than the other ones, except against a few specific enemy types. Most of the guns don't even have some kind of unique utility, and the ones that do are objectively better than the other one in the same weapon type. And another thing is they just completely gutted any amount of skill related to resource management. Not only does every gun have more ammo than Eternal, but meleeing enemies gives you ammo back, and you're constantly meleeing them. This is not like the chainsaw, where you only get to use it every once in a while. No, you're smacking bitches every 5 seconds. I genuinely think the majority of skill in this game just comes down to crowd control and your placement in the arena. As long as there's no enemies behind you, there's no reason you should die. Now, of course, the game tries to cheat you by spawning enemies behind you at various points. But I think after a certain point, this game just doesn't require much skill anymore, because it's very easy to memorize the parry timings, given they're so generous. And there's not very many enemy encounters where they throw multiple high-threat enemies back-to-back where you can't just parry all of their attacks at the same time. Even those more challenging encounters where I end up dying a couple times really felt hard for the wrong reason. Like, it was more like trial and error gameplay, knowing just how specifically to approach the situation. I didn't ever have to get good at any point, because I'm not really sure what getting good even means in the context of this game. This game doesn't even feel like it was designed for you to get good at it, which is ironic given that was the entire appeal of the previous one. But again, I'm the type of guy who doesn't care if a game is hard, it just has to be fun. But this game just isn't really that fun, because holding right click to deflect projectiles over and over and over and over again just isn't fun in the context of a shooter. The shooting should be the fun part. Yet all the guns kind of just feel the same outside of a few exceptions. So yes, I know it sounds like I'm being super harsh. I don't think the game sucks. I still think the core gameplay loop is fine. It was definitely an interesting experiment, but the execution is poor, to say the least. This game doesn't feel like it was made for Doom fans. It doesn't feel like it was made for fans of Doom Eternal, certainly. It wasn't even made for people like me who didn't like Doom Eternal. I honestly have no fucking clue who this was made for, except possibly the lowest common denominator. I don't know if this is because of Microsoft's influence or because of Bethesda's influence. Doesn't really matter to me, but it's obvious that this game needed a lot more polish when the only appeal of your game is the core combat, and it somehow manages to get boring, then you fucked up. So it looks like we've truly reached the dark ages of the Doom franchise. That's about it. See you next time, guys.